So we've talked about using remote cameras on the show before, a couple of times actually. David Bergman comes to mind with concert photography. But we've never done it related to weddings. That is going to change today. We're going to talk about the creative places that you might put them, how to set them up and how to mount them, how to trigger them, and most importantly, how to get the shot right. Let's go behind the shot. Hi, welcome to Behind the Shot. I'm Steve Brazill. This is the show where we try and get inside the mind of a great photographer by taking a closer look behind one of their shots from conception to completion and all those stories and challenges that happen in between. This episode, like every episode I've done since 2016, has a blog post associated with it. You can find that over at behindtheshot.tv. Find this episode in the blog post. There's a little bit that I write about my guest. Any links that we mention are there. And as well, there are a sample gallery of my guest images. And for today's show, there's a whole bunch of images I'll explain as we go through. Also, if you're watching on YouTube, head down below the like and subscribe button, hit them on the way, hit the bell, get all the notifications when I release something new, and head down to the description. I've got a small little bit down there, but also any links that we mention and any important, information that you might want to get to. By the way, again, if you're watching on YouTube, all of my videos have chapter timestamps in the description. You can jump to whatever section of the video that you want very easily. So just, kind of find what interests you and go from there. So let's jump into the show. And I'm super excited to have today's guest on again because I just saw this guy in February at Imaging USA down in Texas. We had a couple drinks together, had a lot of fun, and it's always fun to see one half of the team of Bob and Don Davis Photography and Design, Chicago-based wedding and wildlife photographer, and what a lot of people don't know is amazing sports photographer too, Canon Explorer of Light too, Mr. Bob Davis. Bob, how are you, buddy?
Doing great. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I agree. It's always great to see you and your beautiful wife and all the other people we get to rekindle our relationship with at these trade shows and events. It's a great place to get inspired, motivated, and energized for the coming year.
It's funny. It's the reason I go to the workshops. I mean, yes, I should go do more of the sessions, but there's a lot of sessions that happen just in the expo, like you on the Canon stage, talking about the topic that we're going to talk about today. But it's seeing people like Larry from Platypod, or I saw Kirsten Lutz at the Camera Shake podcast at Imaging. I saw you at Imaging, got to hang out with Peter Hurley at Imaging. Really, honestly, that's the main reason that I go to these shows. But I didn't even think about this until I was doing the introduction. But I do have to just mention, I introduced you as a Chicago-based wedding and wildlife photographer, but then I pointed out the sports stuff. A lot of people don't know you were a photojournalist and you have iconic shots of Michael Jordan and the Bulls.
Yeah, it's been fun. My career has been a blessing. The camera really has just been an excuse to explore my curiosity about life, culture, people, events. And I got hooked in high school, working on the school newspaper. I was lucky enough to have a decent sports team at that time. Our football team was going to state, and we had local community newspapers. Dig that. Newspapers were a big thing back then. And there was a weekly one.
And we miss them today, don't we?
You do. I do, at least. It was a habit. See, that's the thing people forget about newspapers, even within the industry itself, is establishing the habit, right? But anyways, I was caught by one of the staff photographers at the Star newspaper, Rich Hine. He says, "Hey, come on over here. Let's talk." So he started talking to me, started mentoring me a little bit. He was coming to the games, and the weekly newspaper was getting busier. Our teams were getting better. He's like, "Why don't you freelance for us?" I'm like, "Really? You're going to pay me to take photos?" Boom, took me down to the Star newspaper, satellite office, real professional darkroom at that time. And I was hooked. Like, you're going to pay me to do what I love to do anyways. How do I do more?
Yeah. And seriously, and you post some of them you're going to be selling actually soon. Or if you're not already, and seriously, people, go look at the Chicago Bulls stuff that Bob has, because it's amazing. The other thing though is when I talk about you being a wedding and wildlife photographer, so I DJ'd weddings for 18 years, and there were times that I would be DJing a wedding, and it felt like both a wedding and wildlife at the same time.
Oh, for
It's
sure.
right. Like every job I'd come home and my wife would go, "What story do you have for tonight?"
Exactly. I mean, it's an
Absolutely.
adventure. It's wildlife of a different kind. I mean, really, wildlife is more predictable than the wildlife at a wedding and an event. It
Oh,
truly is.
yes.
Because once people let their inhibitions down, have a few cocktails, now more than ever, especially in Chicago, it's legal to smoke marijuana. So that's kind of the thing of choice. People just let loose and have a good time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they can be fun, but boy, can they be insane. I remember one time at a wedding, I looked at the bride and groom in the planning stages and I said, look, you guys need to do what's right for you. But when it comes to the cutting of the cake and the serving of the cake, I'm going to try and amp your crowd up. And I'm going to say, how many people think she should hit him with the cake? And most of them will boo me for even mentioning it. That's okay. That's part of the energy. The key is you guys need to know and agree ahead of time if you're going to do it. And they both went, no way. We are not hitting each other with the cake. But yeah, great idea because that'll get everybody invested in it, right? And I do it. And out of nowhere, he hit her with the cake up the nose.
Oh,
And
no.
she took the keys and left.
Bye bye.
Literally took the keys and drove away. Weddings can be so much fun. So for Bob Davis, I'm not going to go super deep into Bob's history because Bob's been on the show a number of times before. If you listen or watch this show for any amount of time, you know who Bob is. But I do want to, for those that are new, give kind of a helicopter view because I mentioned your wife, Dawn, you and your wife, Dawn, highly sought after wedding photographer team. You've done some high profile weddings, Eva Longoria, Tony Parker, Lala Vasquez and Carmelo Anthony, Tracy Edmonds, Eddie Murphy, right? You're a Canon Explorer of Light, which is the elite of the elite. And you're also a member of a number of other, ambassador teams, Westcott Top Pro Elite, SanDisk Extreme, Pro Gear influencer, Pro Media Gear influencer. You're like me, you're a Platypod Pro. I love Platypod stuff. We'll actually touch on a little bit of that today. But as an educator is where I kind of think you shine. Like I've seen you and Dawn on stages at these expos, at these shows, WPPI, Imaging USA. There are some people that get up and do presentations that are good at it. And then there's people who, and we see this in all walks of life, there are people who are kind of born to educate others. And you've kind of turned that in, even with your wildlife photography to doing workshops, right? The last time you were on the show, in fact, it was a wildlife shot, even though you're mostly known as a wedding photographer. And I know that you have an Alaska workshop coming up. Tell me about that.
It is. It's a blessing to get to do this. I don't consider myself a teacher at all. I just have this passion that I want to share and I want to empower people that when they walk away from Dawn and I's presentation, they have something they could use right now. That afternoon, they could try it. And I just explain things the way my brain works. It has to be simple and I have to be able to follow it A, B, C. Because in a lot of these situations, wildlife, weddings, things like that, it can't be too complicated because you just won't do it or you'll overthink it and make a mistake. So yeah, we have an excellent trip coming up to Alaska. It's our Alaska brown bear adventure that's in September. And you can find all the information about that at inthewild.bobanddawndavis.com. So that's going to be an exciting trip. We've done black bears, which are amazing to walk with in the northern woods of Minnesota. But being in Alaska, the last kind of frontier, and with grizzlies, that's your biggest apex predator besides a polar bear that you could get close to. And you just have to realize, I have to believe, and I do personally believe, that wildlife are far more predictable than people because they telegraph all their intentions and emotions. It's up to us, as with people too, to pick up on those cues and listen to them and respect and give them their distance.
To know your subject, as it were. So the workshop itself is in September, inthewild.bobanddawndavis.com.
Correct.
And was that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
That
so
is
it's in
correct.
September. This show, I believe, will air early to mid-June. So when you hear this, It's the perfect time if you want to go investigate this and get yourself signed up. They do have spots left at the time of recording. We're recording this actually in April, and then I'm taking the month of May off for some travel. But when you see this episode in June, that's a good time for you to go kind of investigate this more. So I want to get into some photography stuff here because I ask all of my guests this question now. What makes a great photograph great?
What makes a great photograph great is so personal because on the human level, everybody connects to an image in a different manner. It's what speaks to them. So, for example, print competitions, any print competition, usually the images that win are perfection. They're executed perfectly, they're artistically perfect. All of the components going into it, composition, exposure, color, all of that is perfect, and they're just perfect. But how many people remember images, right? If it's just a perfect photograph, which is artistically perfect, nothing wrong with that, they may not connect with it on an emotional level. So for me, most of our pictures, we try and draw people in with some type of emotional hook that they can relate to. Now, while we still do take beautiful photographs, which is fun, but the memorable ones, which we get feedback from all of our clients, be it editorial, wildlife, or weddings and events, is some type of an emotional connection that people have with it.
Okay. Yeah, all of that makes total sense. And what I love about that, it's kind of a unique answer compared to what other people have done. So normally I would say what makes a great photograph great, and then what makes, in your particular case, let's say a great wedding photograph great. But really what you answered kind of fits whatever your genre is. And I like that more holistic view of how to look at photography even as a photographer, which I think is part of the problem that we sometimes as photographers have, is we look at photography, in particular our own, from it's kind of like magic. So there's a lot of people who do magic and it's like, I really want to fool magicians with this. Well, fooling a magician with a trick is completely different from fooling a layman. You can do a trick that will blow laymen away, that every magician knows how it's done, and it doesn't matter, right? It really depends on the point of view that you're coming from. Before we started this, I had you write down 6 terms. I'm doing this now. This is probably, I don't know, my 6th or 7th one or something like that I've done this for. I had you write down 6 terms. The terms are technical execution, storytelling, creativity, impact, composition, and lighting. And here's what I'd like you to do from Bob's point of view. Rank these starting at number 6 up to number 1.
Sure. So for me, number 1 is always the story. We got to have some storytelling element in the photograph that relates not
so this would be your number 1 most important.
Yeah, story for sure. Is I communicate a lot with our clients, with our subjects, human elements, right? Because I want to tell their story. I could take the most compelling photograph that I think is awesome in my mind that totally is unrelatable to them. So for me, it's what's their story and how do we tell it? So that's where that journalist comes out. Photojournalism is words and pictures. We ask a lot of questions before I ever take the photograph. So the lead photograph that we're going to be talking about came to fruition from an interview with the couple, how they met, what did they want to do? They met sharing a cab. And they kind of had this look at one another when they jumped in the cab together. And, we'll call it love at first sight. The groom, happened to be very smitten with her. And, at first she was like, whatever. But they kept seeing each other outside this office building, shared a cab. That's the beginning of their story. So hearing that, I start clicking in my mind, how can we execute this to start off their story? And I present to them this idea. Well, let's take a picture, obviously, of you guys with a cab. And they're like, we don't want to just stand next to a cab. I'm like, no. I want the romance. I want Twilight. You're in the cab. The cab is zooming through the city and you're glancing into each other's eyes. That was the story.
So if storytelling's number 1, let's jump to the end now. Let's go backwards for the rest. What's number 6? What's the least important on this list to you? Not saying that it's not important. They're all important. I'm saying in your order of priority.
Um, in my order of priority, you know, I would have to go down and say composition, only because that's kind of the last thing I do after we'll go through the story. Then we're going to figure out how we can technically execute that story. And then we're going to go for the visual impact. Like these are the moments,
Right.
and I'm kind of like their actors. I give them a role to play. Like, okay, you're in the back of the cab, you're looking at her. Remember that first time you saw her and you fell in love, and you see this warm flush come over it, and they get it. And of course, the girl, she's like, oh, yeah, look at me that way all the time. I want to be looked at like that, right?
So storytelling's 1, technical execution
Yep.
2, impact is
Technical,
3.
yep. Lighting, and then, well, creativity is right in there with the technical, because for me, they kind of go hand in hand. We got to have the technical to be creative, right? I just don't go by chance. We're just not going to throw the camera up and cross our fingers, hope we get something,
Right.
right? Going back to my days as a photojournalist, I tell this story very often. My first assignment, I was hired by Bob Katalik, old school chief photographer at the Sun Times, and he gave me the first assignment, was holding on to it, and he's like, come back with a good picture, or don't come back at all. We can't publish an excuse. So that resonates in my head for every assignment, especially with technology and the things we could do today. There is no excuse, right? You really can, if you think it through, practice, rehearse, you're going to come back with success. There really isn't an excuse today with the level of technology and capability we have at our disposal. Your imagination could just go wild to execute things.
Okay, so let's just recap here
So
to make sure I have
lighting
them in order.
comes in there. Yeah.
So storytelling 1,
Storytelling.
technical execution 2,
Yes.
creativity after that, then impact,
Yep.
then
impact,
lighting or composition.
Lighting, for sure.
And then composition is 6.
Yep. Because if I've done all the others first, the composition should just fall right in. For me, the way I think.
Yeah. Dude. So your whole process, I've had people on the show that take 5 minutes to sit and think, and I leave the silence in there because I love hearing people think. Your immediate knowledge of how you on a shoot process those 6 things that I didn't even tell you about until 10 minutes ago. I absolutely love that. So let's jump into these photos, because you mentioned the cab shot that we're going to get into. Before we do, for those of you, again, that are on the audio feed, normally this is the point where I'd bring up the single shot that we're going to talk about, and I would tell you about the shot, and I would describe the shot verbally to you, which some people love and some people hate. Some people are like, shut up and get to Bob. But if you're on an audio feed, this is a photography podcast. It kind of helps if you understand, what it is that we're talking about. That's not going to happen today. I'm not going to be describing any images today. We're talking about remote cameras. And unlike when I had David Bergman on, and there are many places you can mount a remote camera at a concert, but with a wedding and venues being different, and there's so much of a variety that can be done in weddings that I think people don't think about. I have a bunch of shots. Like I have behind the scenes shots of the cameras mounted, and then I have the results from those camera mount setups to show you. I've got like 16 shots in all. So it's going to take a little bit of time to go through them all, and describing them would be a nightmare. But a couple of things that you can do if you want to see the photos that we're talking about. Number 1, go find the blog post, behindtheshot.tv. Down at the bottom, I've got a gallery of all the shots that we're going to be talking about today. All you got to do is head down there, and it makes it really, really easy for you. Okay. I've got, some of Bob's just general work, and then all the shots that we're going to talk about, all 16 of them. You can also, of course, go to Behind the Shot on YouTube. It's just at Behind the Shot. On the YouTube channel, scroll through the video. I've got a section, again, chapter markers down at the bottom. You can jump to whatever you want. Again, if you're on YouTube, hit like, hit subscribe. Wherever you're listening to this podcast, by the way, this is a podcast first and foremost. If you're watching on YouTube, I don't really focus it towards that. You can tell by the length of the video. But wherever you get your podcasts, you can get this in video there as well, or in audio format. If you would take the time, drop us a review if your location supports that. That would be absolutely fantastic. So let's do this. Again, lots of photos today, 16 of them. And I want to start with this one because this is the shot that you were talking about. This is one of my favorite wedding shots I think I've ever seen. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And this may ring a note with you or not. I don't know. I know because I know you, this is a wedding shot. But I see this in my head as a cinematic romance. Like,
For sure.
This image is, okay, this is going to sound, people are going to think I'm nuts. If you look up love in Wikipedia, that should be the photo, right? Because what you have here, this is life, right? This isn't posed under a tree. Nothing wrong with that. This isn't bride and groom in wedding dress and tux. Nothing wrong with that. This is life. Open 7 p.m. to 6 a.m. Cab number, lights going by. You're on the trunk. You're shooting through the back window. They're lit, by the way, strangely beautifully inside the cab. Like no cab is lit like that on the inside. So again, we have a lot of shots to get through. So for those of you that really want deep dives on each of these, leave a comment down below. Could you do a single show on that shot? And I'll talk to Bob about doing that. With 16, we're going to go through some of them pretty quickly, but tell me, you've kind of hinted at the story of this, but how did you pull it off?
Pulling it off, you have to think things through. First is the idea, right? And once you get the idea and you get the couple on board, then we can rehearse things. I can rehearse, not with them. Practice.
Can I interrupt you? I apologize.
Yeah.
You just said something I think that's key, though. Once you get the couple on board, I don't mean this to sound flippant. Obviously, it's important that you have buy-in from the subject. But how important is that buy-in before you shoot it? I mean, could there not be a case where you shoot this and they're iffy and then they look at it afterwards and go, damn, Bob, you were right? I mean, how important is that buy-in ahead of time?
For a shot like this is complicated. This is a complicated shot, no doubt. I need the buy-in because a couple things need to happen. I need the time and their patience to set it up. For safety, right? We're mounting a 5-pound camera on a moving vehicle. So that's got to be safe and secure. And then 2, you wouldn't believe how much time it takes to find a taxi cab that is yellow and has the taxi cab sign on the roof. Pretty much all of them, for lack of a better term, are a Prius these days that are a hatchback and they don't have the taxi cab sign on top.
Yeah.
So explaining this vision, we had to go downtown a little bit early, outside the building where they had met and curate a cab. And then I had to convince the cab driver, hey, I'll throw you an extra $25 while the meter's running to let me do this. Right. So that's the buy-in. That's why we need them to be patient. It's not like we're staging the whole thing. Like if this was for a publicity shot for a movie, well, then they would have had the cab. They would have had the models. They would have had everything in place, ready to go. This is organic.
This is impromptu in essence.
It is. Yeah. So for this shot, we need the buy-in. For other shots that we'll go through, no, I don't need the buy-in from them at all.
So, okay. So you get the cab driver. This is crazy to me. Gear-wise, you've got some crazy gear with this mounting. We see a 3 suction cup mount on the trunk. Explain to me your idea here on how you're going to get the camera where you need it, how you're going to get it aimed, how you're going to figure out your exposure, how you're going to, you're going to trigger it, and where the hell are you?
Sure. All great questions. And again, this just comes from thinking things through, right? I always have like an idea book, and whenever I'm going to go, see if I can get this to show up. Yeah. Whenever I get an assignment and I start getting creative ideas, I'll start sketching things out, right? Kind of crude, but that helps me think through the process. And then I'll set it up here at home to rehearse. How can we get this executed? Because again, they're not going to want to hang around for an hour while I do this. This is done relatively quickly. Once we found the cab and the driver said yes, boom, then we're good to go. So the gear you need is something to be safe. So that was a Delkin Fat Gecko 3 suction cup mount, right? All 3 suction cups are mounted. It's rated, I believe, up to 15 pounds safely to hold a camera. So that gets the camera mounted in place. This is a Canon 1DX Mark II with a 15 to 35 EF 2.8 lens. Now, for this type of shot, you got to think things through. You can't let the camera be autofocusing because remember, the basis of all autofocus is highlights, brightness, and contrast. That's what it's going to go to. The rear window is going to produce a lot of reflection. So therefore, we're going to pre-focus, lock the focus down, and hit the aperture at f8, right? Boom. So hence, that's telling me, let's go aperture priority because I want the shutter speed to adjust because this isn't a static shot. This shot, we were actually driving around. This isn't Photoshop to create this blur and all of that. That's the slower shutter speed. And now thinking of that, we put a Canon 600EX RT version 2 in the cab. So it's communicating wirelessly to the camera's trigger, which has an STE3 in the hot shoe. So to bake it really quickly, I'm in the front seat of the cab with a pocket wizard to fire the camera, when the fire. The camera has the speedlight transmitter talking to the flash inside the car, which is gaff taped to the back partition of the cab with a mag bounce there. So it's popping that light on them. Now, nothing's left to chance. So we had manual mode. We metered it before we even started with the car driving because I didn't want the TTL exposure to fluctuate with the ambient light. So we metered it for f8, right? So it was 800 ISO. So the only thing we were going to let fluctuate was the shutter speed because I wanted that drag. I wanted that slower motion to get the blur. So we had to tell the speedlight transmitter second curtain sync. So the flash would fire after we had the motion blur as the car was driving. So when I was in the front seat, I was guiding the taxi cab to stay on illuminated streets where we had some lights going by. And the other key thing that I figured out from practicing was I needed a polarizer filter on the front lens to minimize the reflection because that rear windscreen is at an angle and it was getting hard to see the couple. So by putting a polarizer filter on, boom, we got right through.
Oh, okay. Oh God, there's so much to unpack and I've got 15 shots to get
right?
through.
I know.
Yeah. But the polarizer
Sorry, this
thing,
one was a really complicated shot.
At what point did you think of the polarizer? Because when you said it, I kind of went, what? And then it hit me, reflections off the window. But you could have been driving for an hour before that. You went, oh, you know what? I better put up. At what point did you think of that?
When I was rehearsing at home on my car.
Wow. So the polarizer
the way
thing
I rehearsed
is
at home is I'm driving my car. I mounted the camera outside on the hood of my car, looking at me driving and the flash on the dashboard, right? And a few times before I had the polarizer on, what the heck is going on? I was getting too much reflection and glare and not really seeing the face for the expression. And that's what pulls you in.
Okay. So another question. Explain again for layman, pointing at myself, why you did second curtain on the flash instead of first curtain.
Sure. So the difference between first curtain and second curtain sync is when the exposure begins, normal default is first curtain sync. So your shutter opens up, exposing the image sensor, and then closes. So in first curtain sync, that shutter opens up and the flash fires. So any light streaks that are going appear to be going in reverse, right? Because the exposure of the couple is baked in first with the flash, with the primary exposure. Rear curtain sync is just the opposite. So we're exposing, the light is streaking, and then the flash fires at the conclusion of the exposure, thereby freezing the couple with the streaks pulling away from them.
Okay.
So
All
you
right.
have that ability. Pretty much nowadays, all of your off-camera wireless flashes have the ability to pick between first curtain, second
Right.
curtain, and high-speed sync.
So just to recap, we've got this mount, right, on the back of the cab. It's in aperture priority mode, set to 8, f8. You're at ISO 800. Because it's an aperture priority, your shutter speed will go up and down. You pre-checked your exposure with the flash. Flash is metered
Correct.
at f8. The flash is actually on the barricade between the driver and the rear seat, the safety barricade, the divider, and with a mag mod on there. You've got all your exposure set. Now, as you drive around, it will automatically adjust the shutter to counteract that. And of course, you also did all of this exposure setting with the polarizer on there, which is going to darken everything down. There is one problem that I could have seen happening here, though. And that is, I'm going to go all day on this damn shot. Oh my God. And that is, if you've ever been in your driver's seat and you put on polarizing sunglasses and you
Right.
look to the side at your side windshield, you'll get weird blotchy rainbow effects
Yep.
in the window, which is the polarizer working on the tint that's on the natural tint that's in your window. And that didn't happen here. I'm guessing it's because of the angle of the back window. I don't know. We may never know, right?
Yeah, with a polarizer like your sunglasses and things, it is the angle you look at the glass. So usually, and that's where you have to use the CPL, circular polarizing filter, and you'll turn it until you get the desired effect you're looking for. So we intentionally parked it underneath some bright lights, and I minimized the reflection by turning that filter, because once the car is in motion, we can't keep
Right.
adjusting that filter.
And you're
Right.
just hit, you're just
And we've
hitting your
already got
trigger.
it dialed in.
You're just in the
Yep.
front seat hitting the
Yep.
pocket wizard. Okay.
Yes, watching the couple. And they didn't need really much guidance because they got into the moment. They got into the role. They bought in 100%. So they're looking at each other, they're talking, they snuggled up. He had his phone playing their song. I don't recall what it was. So the whole scene was set. And I'm like, this is a duck in a barrel now. But I didn't leave anything to chance. Whenever
Right.
we do these type of shots, even we just did a big gala in Phoenix, Arizona for our client, and we had to do many different scenes. We rehearsed those lighting before we ever got to Arizona. So I knew what light was going to be where, how it was going to light the scene, what modifier was best. We'll rehearse, be prepared for the moment instead of chasing it. And that's another reason we didn't use auto ISO, because then as you got into a darker street, the ISO is going to jump up, your shutter speed is going to be faster. We wanted to keep that shutter speed low.
What was the shutter speed on this?
This one was a half a second.
Wow. Okay.
So
again,
I also used exposure compensation, right? So you have the ability, if you're using TTL in an automated mode or anything that's automated, auto ISO, aperture priority, anything, we could take exposure compensation of that auto exposure up or down. So I wanted it to remain dark, right? We wanted that shutter speed to go low. So I'm minusing the exposure compensation so it could keep the darks dark.
But I thought you said the flash wasn't in TTL. It was in manual.
The flash wasn't. I'm talking about it. So you have exposure compensation and flash.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
Comp.
Yeah. You're talking
Once we're in manual mode. Yep.
Yeah.
Once we're in
gotcha.
manual mode on the flash, no longer will flash exposure compensation have any impact.
So for the rest of the images, I just have to say nothing is going to me compare to this. This is one of my favorite wedding shots I've ever seen. There is so much right with this. I could do a show on this compositionally, lighting, exposure, concept. I could go all day on this shot, but let's talk ceremony. So, because this is one of the areas, that last shot is complex and it's above and beyond, right? It's what puts Bob and Don above most other wedding photographers, but every wedding photographer shoots the ceremony. And it's an opportunity for those wedding photographers that are looking to expand their base, to get things in their portfolio, to give their bride and groom what I used to call 1%ers, things that just set you 1% above everybody else, right? And that is remote cameras. So this is a shot of a wedding where the camera is up high clearly inside the flowers above the officiant. And the result is you get this wonderful wide shot of everybody with the bride and groom centered in the actual aisleway too. So now you've got head in a clean spot as well. And I'm going to show this really early, but you've got it marked on this shot. But the camera is right here inside the flowers. So explain this setup, concept, and et cetera.
This is easier, way easier to do than the taxi cab shot. And again, I don't need any buy-in from the couple. I don't want them to know this is there. So they're not turning going, oh, is that camera going off? I want this to be a real wonderful moment.
Right.
So this is the same concept idea as a backboard camera in basketball, right? I did all that with sports and traveling with the Bulls. But here we're going for something unique, meaning I don't want to be in the shot. I don't want to be up close to them. And one of the things, again, that came out in speaking to the couple is they want to see the reaction of the crowd once they're married. So those were things that they said to me. And I'm like, okay, how could I do that? I don't want to be up on the riser with them, which I could have been. I don't want to be in the shot. So for this, I'm actually way back in the corner. You could see me standing up to the left of that archway. I'm in the dark suit by the trees there. And I'm using a 70-200 to photograph live with Pocket Wizard remotes, right? So what I'm doing now is every time I photograph with my primary camera, it is simultaneously firing the remote camera instantaneously. Now, the reason I love Pocket Wizards is twofold. They're reliable and they are not, I'm going to repeat that, they are not on 2.4 gigahertz. Almost all other low-cost, generic, I'll call them remotes that you could find on the market these days that are inexpensive are at 2.4 gigahertz. The challenge with that is they're going to get affected by cell phones and everything else that is wireless within the environment.
It's a crowded
Wi-Fi. Therefore, you're not going to have, yes, it is. You're not going to have the reliability of capturing the moment. So I have a transmitter, Pocket Wizard connected to my primary camera. I have the receiver. They're transceivers and they're intelligent. So they know what role there is depending where they are in the camera. So this is mounted. I got there earlier in the day, mounted it on the decor, and I asked Floral before the floor was even going up, hey, is it okay? Can you build out some flowers around this camera? And I'm like, oh yeah, great idea. We've never seen anybody do this before. Awesome. So I put the camera in place. And then the only thing you have to do is, because the wedding is busy, is to make a note to yourself a half hour beforehand, go in there and turn everything on and make sure it's firing, right? Then it's easy. Same thing here. We're at an aperture of 10 because they said to me they want to see the faces in focus in the crowd. So again, I don't always use, we'll call it a large aperture 10, for that much depth of field, but we wanted them in focus and the background in focus. So again, great autofocus camera. This was a 5D Mark IV, but I pre-focused right in the center where they're standing with my assistant. We locked down the focus, taped it so nothing could get bumped and moved.
Right.
And it's usually what people do in sports is they pre-focus in the spot where the action is going to happen, and we're good to go. Everything's locked in. We're going to talk about a few other ones as technology has improved and changed, where I allow the camera to autofocus and follow the subject. But it's knowing when to use that technology, when it will work, and when it will not give you the results you're seeking.
So this one being dead center, again, one of the issues here you have no control over is, had they literally just, people don't always stand dead center, right? They could have,
correct.
They could have accidentally during a ring exchange or something separated to put rings on, and then he walked to her and they were in front of the crowd on the right but them being dead center, which was not in your control.
Nothing in my control.
But you set yourself up. Like that to me is the big thing here. You set yourself up with all the pre-thought, with all the understanding of how it's going to work for success to get a shot like this. And just so people know, this is where Bob was saying he is back here in this back right corner, right? Is that you?
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
So we still have the photograph live, so to speak,
Right.
of them kissing. And then we have this impactful shot. And then as soon as they stopped kissing, yeah, I came dead center. So when they recessed down, we got those photographs of them dead center.
So,
but we could call it a drawback, but it's really not, is when you're set up this way, every time I photograph with the primary camera, it's firing frames on the remote. And sometimes you get some great serendipity moments.
oh, that's a good point. That's a good point. So let's take the camera off center. When you go off center now, same kind of a concept. Camera just isn't dead center behind them. Suddenly you get a completely different view of the wedding. So instead of symmetry now you get more of the bridal party. You get a different kind of compositional structure as far as rule of thirds go. And on this one, you use, I'm going to circle this one as well, but the camera is right here on a stand because there's obviously no floral, behind them. So explain basically the same concept as that last one that you did, or was there something different you did here?
It's basically the same concept. We didn't have anything to mount the camera to because the pillars were this reflective acrylic. So there's nothing to physically grab on with the camera. So that's why I used a light stand with the camera at the top. And, the video team thought that was such an amazing idea. They asked if they could put a camera on my light stand. So that's why there's two cameras there. One is mine and one is for video. And of course, we play nice. We're all serving the same goal here with the couple. And again, the reason the camera's off to the side is we didn't want this camera dead center being an eyesore during their decorative arrangement for the ceremony, right? So get it off to the side, out of the way. It is strategic, meaning we placed it on the side to photograph the bride because brides are kind of the star of the show in a wedding. So it's from her angle. So you get 90% of her expressions in the interactions. And again, it comes from the motivation that I do not want to be up under the wedding canopy during the ceremony. I don't need to if I have a remote camera and I could stash it. And then we get both points of view. Again, I'm at the end of this aisle outside the tent, sitting down there with my 70 to 200.
Right here, right?
Photographing the shot. And that camera that's on the floor, that's not mine. That's video. Like I never leave anything in a way where it's going to impede traffic flow. Because once they start recessing down the aisle, it happens quickly. That could trip an elderly person or a guest. And that's the furthest thing I want to happen. So I don't leave anything in an environment that can anyway cause a safety concern. So even with the camera in the previous ceremony where it was dead center, I use safety straps on everything. So if the mount for whatever reason comes loose, the camera's not going to fall and injure anybody. So safety is imperative. Even here, this light stand is weighted. So if somebody hits that weight stand, it's not going to fall. There's sandbags on the bottom.
Okay. So just to recap though, this is you right here, right?
Correct.
And then this is the camera you're talking about on the ground.
Yes. Like I wouldn't do that because I'd be afraid I'd forget it's there and a guest would trip over it and hurt themselves.
Exposure wise on this, I'm guessing you did a similar thing. You locked the autofocus. Are you in an aperture priority mode here too? Like at around F10?
Yep. This one here, let me make sure because sometimes I'll dial it in. Yeah, this one was also aperture priority. And this one was the R6. So now I'm letting the face detection autofocus work, right? Because as they move, it is totally tracking them. And knock on wood, I've not been burned with this. Again, I've tested it in different environments. And as long as there's illumination that's brighter under the hoopah versus the crowd, the autofocus will work. Now, there are some instances where I'm there, I'm like, oh my goodness, we have no light under the hoopah. It's very bright where the crowd is. Then I will not. I will pre-focus and lock it in, right?
So couldn't it have easily grabbed that maid of honor or best man or something accidentally though?
At that width, at 20 millimeters, at aperture 7.1, everybody's kind of in
Oh
focus.
yeah, that's a good point. Okay. But I mean, I'm just saying the face detection may have
Yep.
grabbed the wrong face. It's just not going to matter a
And
ton.
yeah, and it didn't. I put them into DPP and you could track the focus. And this has only gotten better. So the R6 Mark II is a huge improvement. I now use an R8 for this because it's just as good. Um, I've sold that R6, got an R8. It's small, it's lightweight, it's silent. 24 megapixels are great. You don't
Right.
really need an R5 up there if you don't want to. Besides, most of the time, if we're in an environment where it's dark, you're going to get very high ISOs under there because we can't tie it into the flashes. It would need its own set of lights to do that because we always want the primary live camera to have access to the lights. And they both simultaneously cannot send the signal to the same off-camera lights.
So for this though, unlike the cab, you probably are you in shutter priority and auto ISO, or are you locking the ISO and shutter priority?
No, this is aperture priority and locking in the ISO.
Okay, gotcha.
So
So
it's 7.1. And this one here, I knew it was bright. See, everything was a bright white tone. So again, this is just from experience. We gave it plus 1 2/3 exposure compensation because of all the brightness. Otherwise, the meter would close down
right.
and tend to underexpose the shot.
Almost like shooting snow. So I'm going to go backwards
Yep.
now. I'm going to show the mount first on this one. So this is what is this the type of mount you used also in those flowers? Like what mount is this right here?
Sure. So this is a little bit different mount. This is a Bogan super arm and super clamp. And the reason being is I needed to elevate the camera and get it in a position so that I'm not looking up at the subjects. For the other previous photos, I used the super clamp and then a platy ball. So it could clamp onto something and then be articulated with the ball. In this particular scenario, again, I went out a day ahead of time. I practiced. And if I used the clamp with the ball, it was too low and we were photographing up at the subjects, which isn't flattering for most people. We want to be eye level with the camera.
Gotcha.
And this is a little bit different setup as well, meaning we need the autofocus to track and work, right? Because now they're inside a carriage, they're moving, they're leaning, they're waving. So we want the autofocus to track their faces and get their expressions and what they do. And here I had to rely on the interval timer. So all the cameras now have a built-in interval timer because I'm in a golf cart following the carriage with a 70 to 200. And sometimes I'm 3, 4, 5 blocks away, right? Waiting for the carriage to come to me. So then we just have enough memory card in there that we have it in silent mode, face, head, eye detection, tracking, and we put large memory cards in there and it's taking a photo every 2 seconds.
That often?
Yeah, because we want to make sure we capture moments.
Okay. So how many, okay, you won't know the answer to this probably, but at the end of this drive and a carriage moves really slow, how many shots did this thing have?
I venture to say at least 2,600.
Wow. Okay.
But it becomes very easy when you're culling the images to cut through the tape because you go right to the exactly.
Yeah.
And now this client, you know, again, I don't tell them I'm going to do this. It's now, but I did it once, and now they're like every time they hire us, like, oh, be sure to remember the carriage cam. You know,
love it.
The hoop cam, the carriage cam, because they're seeing these beautiful moments that wouldn't be captured.
Right. No, you're getting those things that the average wedding photographer doesn't even think of. That's what sets you above. And yet any wedding photographer can do this and raise their game very, very quickly by just doing something like this. Let's run through a couple of behind the scenes things really quick. This is you again, setting up a camera. Looks like you're in a church. What is your setup here mount wise?
Sure. So this is actually the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, and I'm up in the technical loft where there's a bar that runs around there that they can mount stage lighting to. And you could actually see the safety strap on the camera. So this is, I believe, an R5, and I've got the Pocket Wizard +4 in the hot shoe. So now, sometimes if I have the ability to do it, I want the same moment captured when I push the shutter. right? I'm within range. I'm going to see what's happening so I could have the timing to capture the moment, the same moment from multiple angles. So we have an elevated view here, which you're not allowed up in this technical loft once the event begins, because they close that decorative door behind it and they don't want the distraction or the risk that you'll drop something
Right.
during the event. But I could mount my camera up there because they're mounting stage lighting up there, right?
So this
And
is
for
a
this
super clamp?
too, this is a super clamp with the super arm because the clamp had to go left to where I could fit my light and then get the arm so it would be center over the aisle.
And then what do you do? I mean, are you cabling it as well with a safety cable, or you just trust the
It
arm?
is. You could see the safe. No, no, no. You could see
Oh,
the
I do
safety
see the cable.
cable
Yeah.
there. No, yeah, I do not want any liability.
Cable's right here. Yeah.
No liability at all.
Yeah.
So that
Smart.
was an R5
So
that
then
was
we go
mounted
to
up there.
this. And this one's
Yeah,
interesting because you
fun.
got it. This is your point of view where you're standing, and it's hard to
Correct.
see in this picture, but the camera is right over here,
Correct.
right? And I'll show you the camera setup here in just a second. Explain this one.
Sure. This is, again, great clients of ours. We photograph all their fundraising galas and events. Mr. and Mrs. Stevenson, they're very philanthropic. And they'll bring in A-list entertainment during these fundraisers. This is Alan Thicke. Yeah. No, Robin Thicke, the son.
Robin Thicke. Okay.
Okay. Yep. And I've watched a few of his videos. So I know when he does his final number, for whatever reason, he'll jump on the piano and he turns his back to the crowd and he pumps his fist. Doing some research that, oh, this could be a cool backstage shot, right? I have to get what they call the money shot. This is the end of the night when they're raising funds. They come up on stage, they thank the guests, they bring all of their talent around them, and we get this wonderful group shot. So I'm at the back of the room by that chandelier on a ladder, photographing live with the 70 to 200 with the same pocket wizard. Now, I'm not relying on chance of the interval timer for this shot because he only briefly goes up there for an instant, pumps his fist, and he's down. So I didn't want to chance the interval timer catching that moment or not. So again, that's why I used the pocket wizards. So you can make these shots as complex as you want, or you could leave it to chance and use a camera with an interval timer, right?
And
And this
by
one here was manual exposure, but auto ISO.
okay.
So this is aperture 3.5, right? At 200th of a second, because I know he's going to pop up and I want to freeze that motion as much as I can. And the ISO is auto ISO. So where it's going to go, I don't know, because sometimes the stage lighting is bright, as you know, at a concert. And then sometimes there's this spot and it worked out great. And this was, again, face eye detection tracking, and it tracked him perfectly because he's in a bright spotlight. There was the risk it could have went to the couple, but it usually always goes to the subject that's brightest and closest to the lens.
That was literally going to be my question. Was it 3.5? That's risky because had it gone to the couple, he'd be really soft.
Yep. But nobody knows this shot is going to be, I don't sell this up front, right? I just did it. And then boom, the event planner, the producer, Thicke, and the client all love this shot.
Yeah.
Right?
So
And that's where
good.
you're trying to do something different and exceed their expectations.
So the key here is, and really the point of the show is, if you're a wedding photographer, and by the way, if you're wondering why I'm looking this way a lot, I only have so many buttons on my Stream Deck and I've got 16 photos. So I'm having to find the line and click on it. I don't mean to disrespect Bob if you're watching this going, why
No,
isn't
not
Steve
at
looking
all.
at Bob? I discussed this with him ahead of time. But the point of the show is, if you're a wedding photographer, wherever you are in your career, you can start this now. Like, you can become that destination wedding photographer by simply adding, again, I've always used the term 1%ers. Those little things that you do, and some of these are not little, granted, but those things that you do that just put you 1% at a time ahead of where your competition is. But again, I mentioned, and we're going to run through these fairly quickly, these these wildlife ones, because the show's really focused on the wedding thing. If you're watching this and as you see these wildlife remote shots, you think to yourself, man, I'd really love to see a whole show just on remote cameras and wildlife. Let me know in the comments and I'll have Bob come back on. Or if there's one of the shots that we covered, cab photo, that you want a deep dive solo episode on, leave that in the comments and let's see what we get into. But remote cameras in wildlife bring in a completely different thing, because a lot of times with this, you're not going to stand in front of this animal and go, excuse me, could you stop for a second? Right?
Well,
So,
he wouldn't either, because he'd be afraid of you.
Exactly. So by putting the camera there, you enable that animal to act naturally, right? To not be afraid, to just walk in their environment without being afraid of you. So you have remote camera setups like this, and this one, it looks like, is that a light on the top?
No, so I got a little, I guess, complicated with this. I wanted stills and video at the same time.
Oh, is it a
So
GoPro?
I put a GoPro on the top. Yep.
Oh,
So
okay.
I'm primarily a still photographer. I just love that impactful frozen moment, but I wanted video of the coyote exploring this area. So these coyotes are in our local forest preserves. They've kind of gotten to know me. This wasn't the first time I placed the camera there, because at first it's something new in their environment. They're going to be a little skittish of it. There's garbage cans in this area, and every morning they go and look for food, garbage that didn't make the can, that kind of thing. So by them seeing me, my car, that camera over a period of a couple of weeks, they got to the point like, hey, no big deal. That's always there. It doesn't pose a threat to me. So then after one of these practice sessions, I thought, well, let's put the GoPro out there. But you never know when they're going to come, right? They're not on a clock. So that's why I connected a USB battery. So that's powering the GoPro. So it could just be at the ready. I think I had to wait about an hour, and the GoPro's on that whole time. Just all I got to do is hit record from my phone and it would fire.
Yeah, makes sense.
But
and
you
then
can see the red light
let me go back
on the camera. Yeah, no, I was just going to say, you see the red light on the Pocket Wizard in the camera. That's because that's the moment I'm firing with my primary camera, which is capturing the low angle moment. And again, this is total now in wildlife animal tracking, tracking the animal with the 15 to 35.
Then you have stuff like this, where you have the bear walking in the distance at a fantastic level in a beautiful scene. And you can do stuff like that because you can mount these remote cameras, in this case, using a platypod and a platyball. Again, full disclosure, we're both platypod pros,
yes.
But I can't tell you enough how much I'm not a platypod pro. I'm not a platypod pro because they came and said, would you? It's because I just love the product. So let's just get that out there. But here's a great use for a platypod: mounting a camera, strapping that platypod. It's all built into the platypod, the grooves to wrap a strap. You can even buy their accessory kit, which has straps. But I've known people to take their belt off and use their belt around a tree to mount this thing last minute with this kind of a setup here. So explain to me this type of gear and how using a plate like this, like a flat tripod, as it were, works for you.
It works in so many ways. I no longer go on assignment without one, because I never know when something will spark my imagination, or I'm at an event where there's an opportunity to place it. Like here, when we were photographing the bears, I stood at that tree for a day and a half with my 400 millimeter lens, and they wouldn't cross because they see me and I'm different. So I'm like, well, wait a minute. What if they cross it like a highway if you're nowhere near there? So then I thought, well, I want a wider shot for that to show the environment. I'll be able to photograph them from a different angle with the 600 millimeter lens. I'm just further away. So that's why I used the remote camera for this instance. Again, no leaving it to chance with an interval timer. That's why the Pocket Wizard is on there. So when I photograph with my 600, it's instantaneously sending that signal to fire the remote camera. The platypod and the plate and the ball have now just become integral for everything I do. I mean, think about this, right? During the toasts, you want to get a different angle of the couple. They're seated at the table. They usually have their big centerpiece in front of them, and you're photographing the speaker. And let's say you're solo photographing this event. Why not put a remote camera in silent mode with face head eye detection right on the table on the platypod? Boom, aim back at the couple. You'll capture them clinking the glasses. You'll capture them kissing. You'll capture all those cool reactions while you're photographing the people giving the toast. So you get 2 points of view simultaneously.
And just to reinforce this, I have one of these near me at all times. This is how I record my whiskey picks for the radio. It's a platypod with a platypod handle and a Platyball Elite. And then I have a little MagSafe mount on the top for my phone. These things are so handy that I have the new platypod over here too. Anyway, not a commercial, just love the product. And
no, it's a tool that's kind of like a Swiss Army knife. You never know how you're going to use it till you have it and let your imagination go. And then all of a sudden it sparks you to think, well, what if, let's try that, right? Once you start down this path, it opens things up.
And in my world, concert photography, and if you go watch the episode with David Bergman, legendary Canon Explorer of Light, also, by the way, legendary live music photographer for Bon Jovi and now with Luke Combs. And when he does remote cameras, he uses platypods on the drum riser or whatever. Like there's a lot of things that you can do here. But anyway, not a sponsored video. We just like the product. So here's the deal. I want to switch gears. We've kind of walked through, if you're a wedding photographer, you can at a relatively easy barrier, right? A mount, a super clamp, a pole, whatever it is, you can, with a relatively easy barrier, you need a second camera. Granted, it's not cheap. Doesn't have to be top of the line. Go get yourself a Canon R50 or a Canon R8. Right. Or whatever your camera
and
of
great
choice is.
Used gear at MPB or KEH.
Exactly.
It's a great place to pick, and it doesn't need to be an L series lens. No,
you really just need something there. If you're a Nikon shooter, grab yourself a Z6 or something like that.
Right.
You can raise your game quickly. Now, I want to switch gears. I want to go into a speed round. I'm going to ask you some questions.
Let's go.
Whatever the first thing to pop into your head is, that's your answer. Your top remote camera tip.
Top remote camera tip is getting it in a position where you're going to capture a great moment. Again, I've taught this. I've shared this with photographers, and then they'll send me their pic. Like, look, I got a remote camera. Like, it worked, but why'd you put it there? Right? It's just getting this ginormous overall. The subjects are this big, and it's like, okay, you got an overall, right? How does that play into this? Again, I go back to story. How does that play into the moment in the story? Right? That's where it really starts to come in, is you're now telling that story with a unique perspective without sacrificing your primary camera. So again, a thing I learned as a journalist is you have to come back with a safe shot. You can't go all in on the risk and it doesn't pay off because, again, you can't publish an excuse. But now I could get super creative with a remote camera at an odd angle, trying to go for an impactful moment. Most things we do are choreographed. Any event, the play and how things are going to happen. Same with sports. That's why sports is such a great thing for remote cameras. There's going to be action at third base, second base. You could set up 2 remotes for that, right? You could shoot live with your camera. A lot of times at the NBA, they're shooting live. They have a backboard camera on one end and a ground floor camera on another, and sometimes even a remote on the mezzanine level with a 300 pointed at the basket for that layup shot. You could fire all those cameras simultaneously, or you could have foot pedals and fire them one by one. Let your imagination go, right? But you want to get a cool moment versus just, here's a remote.
What's your top wedding photography tip?
Don't chase the moment. Be prepared for the moment. Again, you're going to have this act and things are going to happen. But, I like to mentor photographers. I'm happy to help them in any way I can. And I still see a lot of people chasing the moment.
top wildlife photography tip?
Research the animal behavior so you can then predict how they're going to behave and react and where and what's going to attract them. Birds, it's food, it's water, it's shelter. Pretty much all animals are that. And then the more you know about the species, you know how they're going to interact with their environment.
Biggest photo mistake you've made or almost made?
Oh, I made a doozy. Um, wow, which one? Several, right? But it's how you recover. So
Right.
one that comes to mind is I was a journalist at the Chicago Sun-Times, and years and years and years and years and years ago, I had to photograph Mayor Daley in office, kind of like a day in his life. So I had like a half hour in his office. So I'm shooting with two cameras, film, right? So you got to rewind the spool, all that. So my primary camera, I did the cool portraits, everything is good. I walk out of the office and I immediately start checking the take up spool. At one camera, it's just spinning and spinning, no tension. Rewinding, like, oh crap, that was the wide angle shot, not the portrait shot. No film in the camera. So I immediately turn around. I hadn't left, knock on the door, go in, say, Mayor, as I was walking out, I noticed the light was fantastic by these windows. Can I just get 5 more frames? Right. That's another reason I only shoot with two cameras to back you up. But I just wanted to go back with that wide shot. And then what I did is I took one of those little thermal label makers and I put on in fact, I still have it on the back of my cameras. It says think. So every time you raise it up, it's like think. Is there a card? Well, now you could set that up so the camera won't fire without a card in it. Just check your settings, make sure you're dialed in, just think before you push the button.
Favorite composition rule if you have one?
I would say the rule of thirds is my favorite composition rule, only because it goes back to my training as a photojournalist. They don't want things to be uber creative. Real estate's expensive, kind of center everything, not a lot of cropping. And I had to break that when I left editorial. So I had to learn, get things off to the side, let things breathe, use the negative space. So that really helped me evolve.
Favorite band or performer?
Favorite band or performer? Wow, it's been so good. I love Aerosmith.
Okay.
So Aerosmith is a great one. And I would have to say Mick Jagger, but I think Steven Tyler is kind of a bit of a clone of Mick Jagger. So many of his moves and style is taken from early Jagger. So, yeah, I've recently saw Jagger and he's still an amazing performer and entertainer.
Favorite drink?
Old fashioned.
Which we had in Texas. Favorite movie or
Yes.
TV show?
Favorite movie. That's interesting. There's so many great movies. I'm still drawn to the classics. I just love the cinematography and the lighting of old black and white movies. So Casablanca for me,
Oh, good pick.
because it's kind of really campy if you watch the way the acting is, but I still love it, and the lighting. And that's where that term comes from. You had to hit your mark because they didn't have great focusing lenses. There was no autofocus. Someone had to pull the focus. They were slow. So there'd be a mark on the floor, and the lighting was set for that mark, and the focus was set for that mark. And that's why the actor had to hit their mark. So I love that. And everything is composed intentionally and beautifully and lit with intention.
So, final question. Is there a
Yes.
photographer out there that you think more people should know about? One photographer that you think more people should follow and know about?
Oh, yeah. Art Streiber or
Oh,
Strieber. Art Streiber.
Streiber. Yeah. I've had Art on the show
Streiber.
before.
Art is giving. He's amazing. He's approachable. And he thinks things through. No matter how big the client could be or the shoot can be, it's what we all need to do is you get the assignment. Now think about how to be different and how to execute it. and not waste their time. And
He
I don't know anybody that does it better than him.
and is detailed. So I had him on for a black and white shot about it was a promo shoot for a Quentin Tarantino movie where they couldn't get all the
Oh,
main
I think I know
actors
the
in the
shot.
same place at the same time. So when he did the set with the three actors and then Quentin was overseas and they had to go shoot him and put him in, he measured with a tape measure literally where the light
Yeah.
stands are, what angle they're at, so that he could completely recreate and make the lighting make sense. Super nice guy, brilliant talent actually, and artisan. And one of the things I love is I found out about Art a different way. Somebody requested that I have him on the show. And then after the fact, but before I recorded, I found out. So where I live, there's a school, Cal Baptist University, that has an amazing photography program. Christopher, the head of the photography program there, is just running such a great thing. And Art uses a lot of Christopher's students as his interns.
Awesome.
And just he really gives back. Again, I need to get him back on the show. Wonderful, wonderful guy. So
That's a great experience for those students.
I mean, it is. He literally, if you don't know Art Streiber, go find that episode. You'll get the idea very quickly. But he is, I would argue, one of the ultimate masters at commercial photography. Stuff that he does. There's a shot that he did of, I think it was Eisner for Disney, where it was like him in a doorway with a
Yes.
shadow, but then Walt on the wall. Just it's hard to explain unless you go look at it. So in wrap up here, if people want to find you and your wife, Bob and Don Davis, give us your website, your wildlife website, which by the way, the wildlife website is the same website you're going to go to for the Alaska brown bear adventure,
Right.
which is coming up in September. Spots are available. You can go check that out. But what are those two main websites, wedding website and wildlife website?
So our wedding and event is all at bobanddawndavis.com. And for our wildlife, it is inthewild.bobanddawndavis.com.
Okay. And Instagram is Bob and Don Davis, but you have a second one in the wildlife stuff. So it's Bob and Don at Bob and Don Davis for the regular one. And then at
Correct.
Bob and Don
Facebook and everything else.
_ in the wild. Yeah. Facebook is at Bob and Don Davis. YouTube is at Bob and Don Davis. So people can find you everywhere. But here's the easiest thing, folks. All the links are in the blog post, right? So go to behindtheshot.tv, find this blog post. Every link that I mentioned is there. Every link is down below the like and subscribe button in the description on YouTube. Bob, dude, it is always so good to see you. I'm glad that we got to get together at Imaging. I wish I'd seen you at WPPI.
I wish I could have been there too, but we had our Super Bowl event of the year. That was our biggest event of the year that weekend. It took 350 pounds of gear to Phoenix, right? to pull it off. But that's part of always being prepared, and you bring your own gear because you could count on it.
Right. Again, Bob, thank you so much for doing this. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
everything you do for the community. And do me a favor, give your wife a big hug for Deb and I.
I will. Looking forward to the next time we could get together and share some old fashions.
Yeah, I would love that. And you know me and whiskey, so that makes it easier. Folks, again, head to the website. It's behindtheshot.tv. Every show that I do, blog post, I write a little bit about Bob and Don in this particular case, but whatever the guest is, all the links are there, links to the workshops that Bob's going to be doing, sample gallery of their work. And in this particular case, all 16 photos that we discussed are up there as well. If you want to find me, that's fairly easy as well. I'm kind of everywhere. It's at Steve Brazill on Mastodon and Blue Sky and all of those Instagram. I've kind of abandoned Twitter and Facebook at this point, but the accounts are still there. If you want to message them or something, I will get a notification, but I'm not there very often. If you're watching on YouTube, again, if you drop down, hit like and subscribe, click the bell, leave a comment if you've got something that you want to say. And again, it is a podcast first and foremost. So whatever your podcast outlet of choice is, I've got usually both an audio only version or a video version. They may be separate feeds. You may have to search for them, but it's behind the shot video and behind the shot audio. Even Spotify now, my latest 50 episodes or more have video attached to them. I had to do that manually for each one, but they're there if you're a Spotify person. If you're watching in an app somewhere, Apple Podcasts, whatever, you can get video or audio only there. The main thing is I always appreciate you watching. I always appreciate the support. And I hope that you are having yourself a good time of year this time around. Make sure you join us next time as we try and get inside the mind of a great photographer by taking a closer look behind the shot.